And thank you so much for watching Morning Live and staying with us. Now, consumers are seemingly struggling to get good value for their money, and I think everybody can resonate with that. The Consumer Goods and Services Ombudsman says that most of the complaints that they have handled in the first quarter of this year were about services and goods failing to meet the expected quality and standards. Suppliers also don't deliver on time, they charge penalties for cancellation, and they refuse to refund customers. So to tell us more, we are now joined by the Consumer Goods and Services Ombudsman, Magauta Mphahlele. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you. Good morning.
So if we take a look at what you've dealt with in this particular period, we look at 2,191 complained in the first quarter of this year compared to 1,495 in the same period last year.
Yes.
So what exactly does that tell us about what's happening in the business space?
I think one thing consumers are beginning to know about the existence of our office, because it's a very young office. It's 5 years old. We have increased our social media presence, and we are on a lot of radio and television programs to market the office and let consumers know that if they have a problem in the consumer goods and services industry, they have a place to go to lodge their complaints for free. We are a mediation service, so if we can resolve amicably between the consumer and the supplier, then well. But if we can't, it gets escalated to the National Consumer Commission, who can then investigate that company and then refer the matter to the National Consumer Tribunal, which has the power to give out judgments and also to issue administrative penalties.
So more than 50% escalation in complaints. Which were the most common complaints that your office received?
Like we've said, goods being defective, because in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, if you buy something and within 6 months it gets defective, you have the right to a repair, replacement or refund at your option, not at the supplier's option. We also have a lot of service complaints. Services where consumers contract for services, they are promised certain things in terms of deliveries, in terms of the quality of the service, but it never happens. And in some worse instances, they pay for items to be delivered for them, for cupboards to be inserted, and that is never done, and they never get their refund. So that is the thing, the complaints that we deal with in our office.
So once the complaint lands in your office, and you say you try to find an amicable solution to the problem, but how successful have you been? What's been your rate of success in this regard?
The trend has been about in 60% of the complaints we receive, the consumer gets redress. It's either they get a refund or a replacement or a repair or some money back or some form of compensation. Sometimes the consumer is not right. They think they are right. But when we look at the law and the circumstances of the case, we find that the claim might not be valid, or the claim might better be dealt with somewhere else. For example, if you want to claim damages, you have to go to court. It's not something that people would usually agree to. There's a reason why our office tries to resolve complaints amicably, because a lot of the time, as you know, in court, they look at the technical aspects of the law. There's wrong or right. In our space, we are saying, let's work together. Let's see how you can help each other. But if we cannot, like I said, then it escalates to a more serious process in terms of the commission investigating.
And as you say, the consumer isn't always right, and there's always that matter of the fine print that sometimes we miss. Now, with regard to the responsibility, what sort of responsibility does the supplier have in making sure that the consumer, for example, understands exactly the contract that they're entering into one, and also the goods or services that they will receive?
The Consumer Protection Act is very clear that contracts must be in plain language, and terms and conditions must not be hidden. They must be prominent. So the supplier has the responsibility to explain to the consumer, which they don't always do. And in this instance, they also have the responsibility to deliver on the promise that they make to the consumer. If you say to a consumer, I'll deliver your goods in 5 days, do that. If you can't communicate to the consumer that there is a problem, I won't be able to meet what what we had agreed, and this is what is going to happen afterwards. But what we do find is that consumers have to spend their own time, their own money, following up on the supplier. What is happening? Where is my package? Why are you not delivering? And when consumers want to cancel because they are not happy that their expectations were met, then the suppliers are refusing to do that.
So at which point during the negotiation or during this transaction process does the consumer have a right to lay a complaint with your office?
Well, they first have to start with the supplier, because obviously if you haven't spoken to the supplier, we don't know whether there is a dispute or not. You can only come to us when you say, I have tried, I've spoken to them, and they have not assisted me. Then we know there's a valid dispute and we will deal with the matter. But if you come to us before you have gone to the supplier, it doesn't mean we will reject the complaint. We will still assist you with that process and refer the complaint to the supplier and manage that process on your behalf.
So I just have to ask this one because I think many people may have fallen victim to this. So the issue of guarantees and warranties and, as you say, possible refunds. So how does that work? Because if I buy a new chair, for example, and it comes to me and perhaps it, has a bit of a defect on it, what am I entitled to in that regard?
You are entitled at your choice. You choose whether you want to return it and they give you a new one, whether you want them to repair, or whether you want a refund. So it's up to you as the consumer. The supplier cannot dictate
but
to
they
you.
do dictate
But
to
then
us.
when they do, you lodge a complaint, because in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, it is your right to decide what happens when the goods are defective. And let's not be tactical about warranties and guarantees. In terms of the CPA, you have an automatic warranty of 6 months. Whether it's been told to you, given or not, it's there by law, on top of the manufacturer's warranty. So if within 6 months you buy new goods and they are defective, you have those rights. And even after that, then the manufacturer's warranties will apply.
Well, thanks so much to Consumer Goods and Services Ombudsman Magauta Mphahlele for educating us on what to pay attention to when entering into a service agreement in order to know one's rights and also to avoid disappointment. I think we need to do much more education in this particular regard. Right, with that, let's get to our question of the day, taking a look at what we asked you this morning. And just to recap on that question, we asked, do you believe that the public protector was justified in increasing the scope of the probe against the president? And of course, there's a lot of toing and froing on that one, but we heard Opasechalwe say that the DA, in fact, did ask for whatever they had investigated. But all the same, these were your responses to that question. All right, do we have those responses? No, we will bring you those responses after 8.